and problems in people's lives will only get worse because of that uncertainty. So you don't have to choose between the Liberals under Mark Carney, who's already shown that he is on the side of the ultra-rich. He has already brought in plans to help the ultra-rich and millionaires. He was the chair of a company that dodged tax, and another company that buys up affordable housing in order to jack up the rent. So he is not someone who is on your side. And Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives, as usual, want to cut the things that you need, and that will make more unaffordable. It will increase the cost of living, drive up costs for childcare, and simply make life more difficult. Our plan is different. We have proposed to make life more affordable. We talked about how we can cut the cost of groceries and increase access to affordable housing. And today's announcement is this. The Liberal and Conservative governments have given loans to large corporations, but they have never helped people buy a first home. So today our announcement is that a new Democrat government will help people buying their first home with a public-backed fixed-term loan with no or low interest, so that it will be really affordable. And this will help people to buy their first home. We think, I mean, it's a new idea, but we think it's a bold idea as well to help people. Not just investments in the ultra-rich. We are there to help you. So I'm proud of this announcement, and it is another example of the fact that we are there for you. We're on your side, and we will fight hard for you.
Période de questions. Une question et une relance. We'll now take the questions from the press. One question, one follow-up. We'll begin with Janice McGregor, CBC.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. We've obviously had the CMHC insuring mortgages for a long time in this country, but this would be a huge step to move to a place where you actually had a taxpayer-subsidized public lender delivering mortgages. Have you consulted with banks and credit unions about how they would feel about this expansion of the public role in the mortgage market, and what that might do to the housing market? Because this seems to me would be a fairly profound attack on their business.
I'm not too worried about what banks think. This is about helping out people, and for a long time, federal governments have been providing low-interest loans to wealthy developers. So they've already been doing that for wealthy developers. They just haven't done it for everyday families. And I think it's the right thing to do to help out a first-time home buyer who's saying, you know what, I could afford a home if only my monthly payments are a little bit lower, and they don't qualify for the lower interest rates because this is their first home they're buying. So they don't have a credit score that will give them the lowest interest rate possible. So we're offering a real solution for those that qualify for a mortgage. They're going to get a lower interest rate. And so I think that's something that's going to really help out people. I think credit unions do a great job of giving accessible credit to people and communities. This is just going to be another option, a real option for people to have a low interest loan. And again, I should highlight, this is not one solution. We need a host of solutions when it comes to the housing crisis. We do absolutely need to build more homes that are affordable. We do need to build a variety of housing, including cooperative and not-for-profit housing. But this is one piece of the solution to keep the dream of home ownership alive, to give people access to a low-interest loan.
En français aussi, s'il vous plaît.
Oui, donc je ne m'inquiète pas des positions
I'm not concerned about the opinions of the big banks. For a long time, the federal government provided loans, low-interest loans, to wealthy developers. They did that for them, but they have never actually helped people who want to buy a first home. And I think we need to do that. It's important. But it's not the only solution. I know that in this housing crisis, we need a lot of different solutions. We need not-for-profit housing. We need off-market housing. We need co-op housing. We need all of that. And we also need to help people who want to buy a home for the first time. We want to retain the dream of home buyership for many people, and that's a clear way of attaining that goal.
And beg your indulgence to ask on a different topic, but a fairly significant development on the foreign interference front over the last couple of days with the remarks from Liberal candidate Paul Chang about Conservative candidate Joe Tay. The Liberals are not removing him as a candidate. He has apologized, I appreciate. But wondering, Mr. Singh, if I could get your reaction to the comments and to the Liberals' response and the Conservatives' response to those comments, and how your party sees this situation. And also, if you don't mind, Jenny Kwan, I would like to hear from you on this issue as well, because you have been obviously personally affected, but also so active about the need to do better on this front. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. So I'll start off, and then I'll invite Jenny up to this podium. So first of all, I think what the Liberal candidate said was obviously wrong. It was clearly inappropriate. And while he's apologized, I still think what he said was clearly wrong. We've got a situation where the public inquiry into foreign interference really highlighted how serious the threat of foreign interference is. And we frankly have two parties that have a long track record of not taking it seriously. We got Pierre Poilievre, who is the leader of a political party that has had numerous allegations of foreign interference directly impacting his own leadership race, and refused to get security clearance, refused to get access to information about that. He was the only federal leader that didn't get security clearance. Every other leader thought it makes sense for us to know what's going on so we can protect democracy. He chose to put his party first. And I think Pierre Poilievre was wrong for doing that. And I think the Liberals also don't have a strong track record on this. They've ignored clear concerns around foreign interference. They've not acted when there was important information that they should have acted on. And now we've got another example of a candidate saying inappropriate things. And so I think there's a track record here. We need to change that. We need to take foreign interference seriously. All Canadians should be free from interference and should be able to participate in our democracy in a fair and just way without foreign interference. This is important for people's participation in democracy, and it's important for all of us to defend it. En français, et puis je vais inviter Jenny Kwan to...
Yes, and then I'll ask Jenny Kwan to share a few words. So what the Liberal candidate said was inappropriate. He is wrong to say that, and he did apologize, but I continue to say that it was inappropriate. And in general, we're talking about two parties where there are a number of examples showing that they have not taken the risk of foreign interference seriously. The leader of the Conservative Party, Pierre Poilievre, knew that there were allegations of foreign interference in his own leadership race, and he did not react. He refused to get a security clearance, and he's the only leader of a federal party that has refused to do that. In other words, he's refusing to know the details of what happened. I think he really wanted to protect his party ahead of this country, and he was wrong to do that. And the Liberals as well don't have a good record. They ignored serious allegations. They didn't take any action when there were allegations of this activity. And I think that it's important at this point to understand that there is a threat of foreign interference that we must take seriously. We have to put our country ahead of our party and protect our democracy.
And with that, I'll invite Jenny Kwan to say some words on.
From my perspective, the comments from the Liberal candidate, Paul Chan, is absolutely astounding. He is a police officer, and he ought to know that when the CCP went out and put a bounty on anybody, including Canadians, that cannot be acceptable. That is intimidation at its worst. And yet, he played right into it. He advocated for people to bring him to the Chinese consulate to collect the bounty. In what universe is this normal? And especially in the face of Canada, where we're faced with foreign interference, active, sophisticated foreign interference activities targeting Canada's democratic institutions. We saw from the Hogue report a significant mention of transnational repression. That's what's happening right now. And it doesn't matter if it's a candidate, it could be anybody. And the fact is, Canadians are faced with that. People from Hong Kong who are fearful of their lives and that of their families, for example, people who speak up against the Communist China's repressive regime are fearful for their lives and that of their families. That is what transnational repression looks like. And we need to stand together to fight against it and not peddle it as the way it is being done from the Liberal candidate. I should also add that the Liberals, frankly, has not taken this file, this issue seriously. We have a registry. People have called for the registry, and the House of Commons, New Democrats led this fight in bringing all the parties together to expeditiously pass the legislation. And what did the Liberals do? They did not fully enact the registry. We still don't have the commissioner, and we're into the election. Meanwhile, you have the Conservatives. Pierre Poilievre would not even get the security clearance. What is he hiding? And why is he putting his own political interests ahead of Canadians' interests? It's shameful. So we need to actually fight this fight. We're in the middle of the election, and only New Democrats have been taking this on seriously. Right. It is time to act. We cannot afford to jeopardize our democratic institutions.
Thank you very much. We'll now pass to Radio-Canada. Juliane Lapointe, Radio-Canada.
Bonjour, Monsieur Singh.
Hello, Mr. Singh. The Conservative campaign seems disorganized with the arrival of Donald Trump and his tariffs. This has become a central issue in this campaign. Now, in your campaign, have you had to adjust your message and your strategy in the face or in the midst of a new election context? Well, I'd like to begin by talking about the Conservatives. It's not only the fact that they did not react to the threat from Donald Trump, but we're also hearing that there are Conservatives even within the campaign that are fighting against each other. So there is division within that campaign, and rather than fighting for Canadians, basically they're fighting each other. So we are very, very determined to show solidarity in this campaign, solidarity with Canadians. And how are we reacting to Donald Trump? Well, we're talking about what we need to defend in the face of these threats. And we're talking about issues like our healthcare system, how we can help people with affordability issues in the face of this threat caused by a trade war. So we are targeting these issues, and we're targeting our own values and values that Canadians hold dear. We want to defend not only our country and our values like healthcare, universal healthcare. We don't want to become the United States. We don't want to become the 51st state, because we want to defend our own public healthcare system and not cut it as the Conservatives are proposing. So we're standing strong, and we're presenting solutions that will make life more affordable for everyday Canadians.
Yeah, for sure. That's fair. I'm just going to do that in English. I'll take a moment when answering that question to start off by talking about not only do the Conservative Party seem to be in disarray because they don't know how to respond to the threat of Donald Trump, there are also more and more reports coming out that they're in disarray internally. They're fighting each other. Reports coming out of the campaign office is one where their Conservatives are fighting each other instead of standing up for Canadians. New Democrats are united all my candidates, our electoral team, our campaign, all of us are united in fighting for Canadians, fighting back against Donald Trump. We're also in this campaign talking about what is it exactly that we're fighting for. Well, we're fighting for Canadian values. When we talk about not wanting to become ever the 51st state, a part of that is because we never want to have American-style private healthcare. We want to defend our universal public healthcare that's there for everybody. That's something that we hold very dear. And so we're going to talk about how we defend the Canada that we want, a Canada where we take care of one another, where we have universal public healthcare that's there for you, where we have strong pensions. And instead of Conservatives who want to cut those very things, make us more like the United States, we want to defend those things. And instead of someone like Mark Carney, who's talking about making a Canada that really is one for billionaires and millionaires, his first act was to make a tax cut that helped out millionaires. We're talking about helping first-time homebuyers buy their first home with publicly backed insurance or publicly backed mortgages. That's how we can actually help first-time homebuyers. So you can see the difference, you know, tax cuts for millionaires from Mark Carney, helping first-time homebuyers with publicly backed mortgages with New Democrats. I think it's clear whose side we're on. Merci, thank you.
We see you here today with some of your MPs and candidates, but the reality is that a number of them will disappear according to polls. Now, how do you explain what is happening? Well, in British Columbia, I think it's important to know that new Democrats defeat Conservatives. With the Conservative threat, we're seeing new Democrat members defeating Conservatives. In BC, it's New Democrats who defeat Conservatives. Now, we did this with our own members of Parliament, and we did it with our new candidates. New Democrats can really fight back against the Conservative threat, and they will defend you. In this election, it's really about who's on your side, and that's New Democrats.
That was a good question. For folks out there in British Columbia, remember it's New Democrats that beat Conservatives. Again and again, you'll see New Democrats beat Conservatives. On the island, Vancouver Island, it's New Democrats that beat Conservatives. Here in the Lower Mainland, it's New Democrats that beat Conservatives. So if you want someone that's on your side, that's going to fight back and defend you and your family, not the billionaires, not the millionaires, not rich CEOs, but you, that's New Democrats that'll do it.
Thank you very much. Now, Rachel Aiello, CTV.
Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. Picking up on that a bit, people have started questioning whether it is still the right strategy for you to be campaigning as to be the next prime minister in this election, and that's coming amid some speculation that your seat might be in trouble. Just wondering, is there another case you should be making to Canadians and to your constituents about the role you and the NDP should be playing in the next parliament?
I think it's a really important question, so I want to take a moment to reflect on this. With 25 of us, we were able to, 25 New Democrats, we fought for the biggest expansions of healthcare in a generation. We brought dental care and pharmacare. These are concrete things that improve people's lives. Millions of people have received dental care because of us. So if you elect more New Democrats, we're going to do great things for you. If you elect enough of us, I would be honored to serve as Prime Minister, and I'll fight every single day to make sure people's lives are better. Canadians will choose the outcome of this election. When you're choosing, remember, more New Democrats means you are better off. When you vote for a New Democrat, you get things like dental care and pharmacare, things that would have never happened but for us being there. The more New Democrats you send to Ottawa, particularly in this difficult time when there's going to be very hard negotiations about the future of our country, who do you want in Ottawa fighting to make sure that people are not on that negotiating table? Our healthcare is not on that negotiating table. Our natural resources, our environment, the things that make us who we are not on that table. You need to elect a New Democrat to do that.
And I'm hoping to hear from Ms. Cirillo or Mr. Julian or really any other candidate that wants to chime in on this one. I'm just curious, you know, we're seeing headlines about the NDP support in the province slipping. I'm just wondering what you're hearing at the doors and how are you addressing it when voters say that they feel like they have to vote Liberal in this election because of the threat of Donald Trump?
Well, I'll start off with an answer, and then maybe I'll invite Peter, because we had Benita here, maybe, and Jenny spoke, so maybe we'll get Peter to mix it up. And so I'll start off by saying, think about what we were able to do for people in this minority government. We're seeing right now the Conservatives are infighting. Their campaign is kind of falling apart. They're fighting each other in their campaign office. Our campaign, our team is in solidarity. We're united and solid, fighting for you and your families. But think about what happened in this past minority government. Think about what happened anytime New Democrats had positions of power. We fought for you. The things that we hold dear, like our health care, that happened because New Democrats fought for it. Tommy Douglas and his team fought to deliver universal health care. Anytime New Democrats are elected to Ottawa, you are better off. So if you're wondering who to vote for a New Democrat. They're going to make sure that you have someone that's going to fight for you, that's going to stand up for you, that's going to be on your side instead of the billionaires. The billionaires already have a lot of support. You need someone that's going to fight for you, and that's a New Democrat. I'll invite Peter up to share a couple of thoughts. En français un peu, et puis je vais inviter Peter Julian pour ajouter quelques mots. Parce que je suis fier de mon équipe. I'm really proud
Because
of my team.
I'm-
You heard from Benita, you heard from Jenny, so we'll bring in Peter too. Et pour résumer ce que j'ai dit,
Just to summarize what I just said,
je pense que c'est important si vous
I
habitez
think it's
n'importe
important
où.
wherever
On est
you are,
montré dans le dernier,
we have shown
gouvernement minoritaire,
in the
on est
past
montré dans plusieurs
minority
cas dans l'histoire de
government
notre pays, quand vous
that,
avez
and
des
there are many
néo-démocrates,
examples
des
of this,
députés néo-démocrates,
that when
vous
you
avez
elect
quelqu'un
New
de votre
Democrat
bord.
MPs, you
Et
get someone who's on your
on livre
side.
la marchandise.
We deliver for
On a un
Canadians.
système de santé publique
We have a
universel
public
grâce à Tommy
universal
Douglas
healthcare
et son
system
équipe.
thanks to Tommy
On a des
Douglas and
choses
his team.
qui
We
sont-
have
sont
things
chères
in
à
place
nous, dans
now
notre pays,
that we
à
hold
cause des
dear as
néo-démocrates.
Canadians
Donc, si
because of
vous
New
êtes,
Democrats.
en décision de
So
qui-
if you're
pour qui
trying
vous
to
allez
decide
voter,
who you're going to vote
votez
for,
pour un député
vote
néo-démocrate
for
parce que
an
c'est quelqu'un qui
NDP
va se
candidate
battre pour
because
vous.
that person will fight for you. And Peter?
Any of you could nod and say yes. Anyone can respond on how you're replying to those voters.
Yeah, come on up and share a couple of thoughts, sir. Good to see
Merci.
you.
Mais je vais les faire d'abord en français. J'ai jamais eu autant de
No,
temps. J'ai jamais eu
I
autant de
have
placements de pancartes.
never
J'ai jamais eu
put
autant
as
de
many
bénévoles
signs up. I've
que
never
j'ai
had
eu
as
dans la
many
première semaine de la
volunteers that I had
campagne
during the
cette
first
année.
week of this
Si on regarde
campaign
les
this year.
sondages, la première
So
fois
if
que
I
je
look
me
at
suis
the polls,
présenté,
well, you know, the first
j'étais
time I ran for the
supposément
party,
troisième dans
I
mon
was
comté.
supposedly third in
J'ai
my
été élu.
riding,
Alors,
and I was elected. So
on fait pas beaucoup de confiance dans les sondages.
we
On fait
don't
beaucoup
have
de
a lot of
confiance dans la
trust in
réaction des
polls.
gens.
We are more
Et
interested
à
in
la porte,
people's
les gens sont très
reactions
positifs.
at the
Ils ont
door. They're very
reconnu
positive,
que l'NPD a
and they
fait
recognize
beaucoup
that
de
the
choses,
NDP has done a
pas
lot of
simplement dans
things,
ce dernier
not
parlement,
just
mais aussi dans
in
le
this
parlement précédent.
parliament, but even in the
Pendant
previous
COVID,
parliament.
c'est l'NPD qui a
During
vraiment
COVID, it was really the
pour les
NDP
gens,
who
et
was
là, avec les
fighting for
soins dentaires,
people,
les échanges
and now
médicaments,
with pharmacare and dental care,
anti-briseur de grève,
and the
ils en
anti-scab
passent.
law,
Les
people
gens reconnaissent notre travail.
recognize
Alors,
the hard work
quand je
we've been
parle
doing.
avec les
So when I
électeurs,
talk to
je
voters,
vois très peu
I
qui sont
see
prêts
very
d'appuyer les
few
autres partis
people that are
à
prepared to
donner,
support the other
vraiment
parties.
ce travail qu'on a fait.
And that's because
So
of the work we
I've
did.
never had as many volunteers, never had as many sign placements, I've never had as many little donations in the first week of the campaign, in this campaign, compared to every other one. And if we're talking about opinion polls, the first time I ran, I was told I was in way behind in third place according to the polls. We won that election, and we've won every subsequent election. So at the doorstep, when I'm talking to people, they recognize that the NDP has brought, not only in this parliament, but in the previous parliament, where we fought for supports during COVID for small businesses and families and seniors and people with disabilities, and students. They recognize that. They recognize our work on dental care. They recognize our work on pharmacare. They recognize our work on anti-scab legislation, on child care, and I could go on and on. I don't want to bore everybody with all the details, but literally the NDP has an unprecedented record of accomplishment, and I think Jagmeet has spoken to that. So I don't meet a lot of people at the doorstep that are supporting the other parties, quite frankly. They recognize the NDP's contributions, and they want to see more NDP MPs in Parliament.
Thank you. Now, Marco Vigliotti, iPolitics.
You mentioned in some earlier remarks about some of the divisions in the Conservative Party. It seems to be a whole focus on, Mr. Poilievre's inability or unwillingness to kind of pivot his message away from, axing the carbon tax to dealing with the tariff threat. I did kind of want to throw that back, though, towards you and your campaign. Some people may ask the question, is the NDP kind of focusing, is it kind of also shifting its message to deal with Donald Trump? So if I'm a skeptical voter out there, and polls show that the tariff threat has increasingly become a top concern for voters. Can you convince me? Can you point to anything in your campaign platform or just your messaging that you wouldn't be saying, that you wouldn't be doing if Kamala Harris was the president?
Well, a lot of what we're talking about now is the fact that life has been really unaffordable. It's been really tough for a lot of folks, and that was the number one thing I heard on the doorsteps and heard across the communities. People tell me life is just, I can't afford it. And I would ask, what are the major top things that you're worried about? And what would come out was right away, homes, like I'm having a hard time buying a home, renting a home, and groceries. And those are the two things that people would tell me they're most worried about. Now with the threat of Donald Trump, it puts this question of affordability really into highlight and makes it even more precarious, and people are really worried. Things are going to get even more expensive. So a lot of our focus is on, dealing with the storm, the threat of Donald Trump. What are we doing to strengthen our country? How can we strengthen our own nation in the face of this really serious threat? So a lot of what we're focused on is, well, if things are going to be uncertain, we got to make things more certain for people. And so today's announcement to give people a solid, publicly backed, CMHC backed, public mortgage that's fixed term, that's affordable, is about dealing with the uncertainty of the future. It's about saying, you know what, things might go up and down, but we're going to have your back. If you're a first-time home buyer, we're going to help you keep that dream alive. And when we talk about how we can bring down the price of groceries, it's also in the face of a lot of uncertainty caused by Donald Trump. How we can bring down the price of groceries and keep the big corporate grocery stores from ripping you off. It's again in that context of being ripped off in light of more threats coming from Donald Trump and the trade war, meaning things get more expensive. And when we talk to auto workers in Windsor, we talk to manufacturer workers saying, how can we make sure that we've got a more resilient economy? So let's build Canadian, buy Canadian, drive Canadian. Supporting buying Canadian vehicles to support our own industry in our country is about standing up and fighting back against Donald Trump. Using Canadian steel and aluminum to build the infrastructure, using BC lumber to build the infrastructure that we need in our country is about strengthening our own economy. Investing in our infrastructure is a way to say, you know what, we don't know what Donald Trump's going to do next, but we do know what we can do in our country. Let's build infrastructure that we need, and let's use Canadian materials, Canadian products, and Canadian workers to build up our country. So all of what we're talking about is how we can stand up to the threat of Donald Trump in that context.
Also, you mentioned, talking about the progress made around dental care and pharmacare. The Conservatives have been attacking, Mark Carney, saying, he's kind of stolen their ideas with getting rid of the consumer carbon tax, walking back the capital gains changes. But also, it's interesting that they've also been campaigning heavily on the progress they've made on dental care and pharmacare. So, you could make an argument that the Liberals are certainly trying to run with those kind of campaign wins or, legislative wins. Why do you feel like your party's not getting the credit for that?
Well, this is a campaign, and we think campaigns matter. And this is an opportunity for us to let people know, those things that we're really proud of, the things that the Liberals might be bragging about, we actually made those things happen. Dental care, we made happen. Pharmacare, we made happen. Anti-scab legislation, we made happen. And so when people are going into the dentist's office and getting their teeth looked after, seniors are getting their teeth looked after for the first time after living in so much pain, we can say very confidently, we made that happen. And this campaign is an opportunity for our candidates to go to the doors and let people know, those things that work really well, they would never have happened if the Liberals were there on their own. It's because New Democrats forced them to make it happen. And we can prove that. So this campaign is going to be a great opportunity for us to show the work that we've done and for folks to know, moving forward, let's keep in mind who's going to be in it for you. We've shown you we've been in it for you, but moving forward, you also need someone that's going to fight for you. There's a lot of uncertain times ahead. I really talk about this storm. That storm is coming. And you don't have to choose between a leaky roof or a cracked foundation. You've got New Democrats who want to build those safe homes for you to weather this storm. And not a storm that's weathered if you're super rich, but for everyday families. We're in it for you. And we're showing you that every day of this campaign. We're going to continue to show you that.
Thank you. Last question, Daryl Greer, Canadian Press.
You talked about New Democrats beating Conservatives on Vancouver Island, but places like that, Pierre Poilievre, regardless of the disarray in the campaign and the reports of that, they've kind of come to eat your lunch. They're appealing to the working class that the NDP is, usually the, self-proclaimed champion of. How are you trying to combat those kinds of voters that traditionally would have perhaps gone with New Democrats, but have gone over to the Conservatives because of Poilievre's targeted messaging toward them?
Like I said, I believe campaigns matter. And in this campaign, we're going to make the case for folks. Maybe you saw a flashy ad from Pierre Poilievre, but let's tell you who he really is. Who he is he's a career politician who spent his career attacking working people. People should know his track record and his voting record. He voted against minimum wages. Voting against a federal minimum wage increase shows you whose side he's on. That doesn't help a working person. That helps the big bosses. He voted against workers fighting back for fair wages. Again, sided with the big bosses. He voted again and again against the interests of working people. And in this campaign, it's an opportunity for us to let people know what his track record is, who he stood with and who he's not stood with. And look at his plans right now moving forward. His plan is to cut pensions. It's not hard to believe because seniors saw that happen under the Harper government. He wants to do that again. He wants to cut your pension. He wants to cut healthcare. At a time when we need more investments in healthcare, we need more healthcare workers. He wants to cut it, make it harder for you to get the care you need, make you wait even longer to get care. So this campaign is going to be one that really matters, where we can show folks that conservatives cut and they hurt you, and Mark Carney is not in it for you. Like it's no surprise that a career banker and someone that was ahead of a large corporate landlord, Brookfield Investments, is not someone that's going to care about you and your family getting a home you can afford. When he spent his whole recent career, as recent as a couple months ago, being the chair of a company that's the biggest tax dodger in Canada, one of the biggest, a company that made money off the backs of hardworking people, targeting affordable homes to buy them up and jack up the rent. He is not the guy that's going to make life more affordable for you. And so really, people have an option in this campaign and in this election, and we're going to show that option every day of this campaign, that we're in it for you. Today's announcement shows you we're in it for you. Every day of this campaign, I'm going to show you that.
Just specific to that program, what criteria would someone have to fit in order to qualify? And I've asked this to many politicians, and nobody's ever been able to answer. How much is reasonable for, let's say, a one-bedroom apartment in Port Moody to pay rent on or to pay a mortgage on, in your opinion? And this could go to any of your candidates. Who can give me a number? So what is the criteria? Does somebody have to make $80,000, $90,000? And how much is a reasonable mortgage payment? How much is a monthly rental payment? How much would that be to be reasonable in your opinion?
Sure. I can give you a couple of different responses. So first of all, who would qualify when you go to apply for a mortgage? The same criteria that you would apply for a bank mortgage, but instead of having to deal with a high interest rate at a bank, we're offering you a publicly backed, low interest, fixed term rent mortgage that's more affordable. So it would beat whatever the rates that banks are given. It would be more affordable. It would be long term. It would be sustainable. And the same criteria that someone would go in and get approved for another mortgage, it would be applied for this case. What would define a first-time home buyer? We've laid out some more details about that, and we can give you more details about our definition for a first-time home buyer. In terms of what's affordable, there's been lots of different metrics around what's affordable, but you need to have money left over to buy the things that you need in your life, your groceries, and save up. So there's been some folks saying that you shouldn't be spending half of your money on your home, and so more affordable would be, some folks have talked about 30%. It should be the cutoff. It should be no more than 30% of your take-home income, so you have at least 70% left over. But it should be that you have enough left over after you pay your housing costs that you could save up, you could buy your groceries, you could save up for a rainy day, go on a trip, and that's what we want to see happen again. If you look back, not too far in time, folks were spending a smaller portion of their income on their homes, and that's what we want to see happen again. So to do that, there's a whole bunch of different ways. We have to have affordable rent. We have to have cooperative homes. We have to have not-for-profit or not-for-profit housing, not non-market housing. We need a whole bunch of options. Today we're talking about one of those solutions, which is to give people a low-interest mortgage so they can afford to buy their first home.
Thank you. That concludes it.
It depends on someone's income. There's something red.
I know, but like, you know, is
Thank
it
you.
is
That concludes the press conference.
We'll have more of a chat maybe afterwards.
Thank you very much.
Okay, folks, we've been taking you live to Port Moody, British Columbia, where the leader of the New Democratic Party, Jagmeet Singh, has been taking questions from reporters on a number of topics. He's been there himself to make a policy announcement on low-interest loans for fixed terms for first home buyers. But there's so much more that he was questioned on. I want to immediately get to CBC's Karina Roman, who was there at the beginning of Jagmeet Singh's statements, and she's back with us now. A lot was covered there, Karina. What stood out for you?
Well, let's talk about the announcement itself. What stood out is I do have the press release in front of me, the news release, and it's pretty scant on details. So that question there at the end about how would you qualify for this, the details, I trust them when they say they have them, but we don't have those details from them yet. But it certainly is a different proposal than we've seen in the past, and whether from the NDP or any other party. If you think about it, you're talking about sort of a Bank of Canada loan for first-time homebuyers, a taxpayers subsidized mortgage lending scheme, which is pretty different than what we're used to, and certainly would compete with banks and credit unions, as one reporter asked. So this would be something, though, that would probably increase the demand on housing, because it would make it easier for home buyers or first-time home buyers to buy a house. And of course, that's probably why you heard from Jagmeet Singh being explicit that there are other things that need to be done to build up the supply. Because if you're actually just building up the demand for housing when we already have a supply problem in the country, you have to find something to counterbalance that. I do want to point out when he said, oh, the CMHC has often given out loans to wealthy developers, but they've never given it to home buyers. Most, at least from what I can tell, of the loan programs for building housing from the CMHC is for affordable housing. We haven't parsed the details to see how they define affordable housing or how much those loans have come out to. But it's not like any private developer can just walk in and get money from the CMHC to build. So that's the big announcement from the NDP. But as you said, Natasha, he was asked a number of questions about things that had nothing to do with his announcement, as they are generally asked on campaign trails. So there was the foreign interference question. This is in relation to the Paul Chang story. He's the Liberal candidate who has now apologized for saying, I don't know whether it was a quip or a really, really, really poorly executed. Well, I mean, it was comments that certainly are troublesome, when he basically suggested that people could make good on a bounty being offered by China for the seizure of the Conservative candidate. I'm now blanking on his name. But that, if you know
it's Joe Tay. Just to help you out, Karina, Joe Tay from Don Valley North.
Thank you. I knew it was Tay, but I was like, what was the first name?
Yeah, you don't want to get it wrong. It's Joe Tay.
No, I don't. So that story still has legs, clearly. Yes, he's apologized. The Conservatives still calling for the Liberals to axe him as a candidate, Paul Chang. Jagmeet Singh did not go that far. He did say that the comments are problems, but he seemed to accept the apology to some extent. He did say, as did Jenny Kwan, though, that they accused both the Conservatives and the Liberals of not taking foreign interference seriously. The other question I just wanted to put out there, Natasha, of course, is the question of polls and the fortunes of the NDP. Really interesting answers there. We often hear when polls aren't good for a party, they often say we don't really trust the polls. Polls have been wrong, very wrong in the past. So it's not surprising that parties don't want to put a lot of stock in them when they're not doing well, but they probably also don't want to put a lot of stock in them when they are doing well, because that can lead to complacency. But the NDP is struggling to get credit for programs that they are quite right in saying that we wouldn't probably have dental care or pharma care or expanded other programs if it weren't for the NDP. But they don't seem, at least so far in the polling, to be getting credit for that. And so it was interesting to hear the questions about strategy. Most times the Liberal and Conservative leaders are campaigning to be Prime Minister. So are the NDP leaders up till now, and he still is, but he's also talking about just electing as many NDP MPs as possible, because look what they did with 25, what they could do with even more, or at least 25, is the argument he's putting forth. So a little bit more of a tempered argument rather than beating his chest saying, no, I will become Prime Minister. There seemed to be a recognition that strategy kind of falls flat, regardless of whether you trust the polls or not.
Okay, CBC's Karina Roman in Ottawa. Thanks so much, Karina.
You're welcome.
All right, let's stick with the federal election campaign and what we've just heard from NDP Leader Jagmeet Singh and some of the other leaders over the course of the past few days. For that, we turn to Stuart Prest. He's a political science lecturer at the University of British Columbia, which is where we found the NDP leader. Very good to have you on the show, Stuart. Thank you for making time.
Good to be with you, Natasha.
I wonder if we could please begin